The morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Kensington Palace, casting golden rays across the polished marble floors. Prince William sat at his mahogany desk, reviewing the day's schedule with his private secretary. The usual routine of royal duties lay ahead: a visit to a local hospital, meetings with charity representatives, and preparation for an upcoming state dinner. Everything seemed perfectly normal in the life of the heir to the throne. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, was in the nursery wing helping their youngest child, Prince Louis, with his morning routine. The 7-year-old was particularly excited about his upcoming school presentation on dinosaurs, chattering endlessly about Tyrannosaurus Rex while she helped him button his school uniform. Princess Charlotte, now 9, was already dressed and reading quietly in the corner, her natural poise evident even at such a young age. Prince George, at 11, was reviewing his homework one final time before heading off to school. The family breakfast was filled with the usual chaos and joy that comes with 3 young children. William joined them at the table, stealing a piece of toast from Louis's plate and earning a giggling protest. Catherine poured coffee for herself and William, while simultaneously helping Charlotte with her math problems and listening to George explain his upcoming rugby match. These moments of normalcy were precious to them both, providing a sanctuary from the constant public scrutiny that defined their lives. The call came at exactly 9:37 in the morning. William's phone buzzed insistently on the kitchen counter, displaying "Father" on the screen. He almost let it go to voicemail, thinking it was probably about some minor royal protocol or upcoming engagement. Charles had been busy lately with various state visits and charitable commitments, and their conversations had been brief and businesslike. But something made him answer. Perhaps it was the unusually early hour for his father to call, or maybe it was simple intuition. Whatever the reason, William picked up the phone and stepped into the adjoining sitting room for privacy. "Good morning, Father," he said, his tone warm but slightly hurried. "I was just about to leave for the hospital visit in Hammersmith." There was a pause on the other end of the line. In that silence, William felt the first flutter of unease. Charles was never one for long pauses. He was typically direct and efficient in his communications. "William," his father's voice came through, and immediately William knew something was wrong. There was a tremor in Charles's voice, a vulnerability that William had rarely heard. "Son, I need to speak with you. Could you come to Clarence House this morning, before your other commitments?" The formal tone, mixed with obvious emotion, sent alarm bells ringing in William's mind. "Of course, Father. Is everything all right? You sound. Just come, please. Bring Catherine if you can. I'll explain everything when you arrive." The line went dead, leaving William staring at his phone with growing concern. He had heard his father worried before, had seen him stressed about royal duties or family matters, but this was different. There was something final, something deeply serious in Charles's tone that made William's chest tighten with anxiety. He returned to the kitchen where Catherine was now alone, having sent the children off to get their school bags. She looked up from clearing the breakfast dishes and immediately noticed the change in his expression. "What's wrong?" she asked, her intuitive nature picking up on his distress immediately. After more than a decade together, she could read his moods better than anyone. "That was Father. He wants us to come to Clarence House immediately." He sounded. William struggled to find the right words. "Catherine, I've never heard him sound like that before. Something's wrong. Something's really wrong." Without hesitation, Catherine began untying her apron. "I'll call the school and let them know the children might be late. You call ahead and clear your morning schedule." Her efficiency in crisis situations had always amazed William. While he tended to worry and overthink, Catherine moved into action mode, handling practical matters while processing the emotional implications simultaneously. The drive to Clarence House felt longer than usual, despite the relatively short distance through London's busy streets. William's protection officers had been notified of the change in plans, and their convoy moved swiftly through the morning traffic. Catherine sat beside him in the back of the Range Rover, her hand resting on his arm in a gesture of comfort and solidarity. "What do you think it could be?" Catherine asked quietly, her voice barely audible over the hum of the engine. William shook his head, running through possibilities in his mind. I don't know. Maybe something with Camilla? Or perhaps there's been some kind of security threat we haven't been told about yet. He paused, considering darker possibilities. Or maybe it's about his health. He has been looking tired lately during public appearances. The mention of health concerns made Catherine squeeze his arm a little tighter. Both of them were acutely aware of their responsibilities to the monarchy and to their children. Any serious health issue with Charles would immediately thrust them into a more prominent role, one they had been preparing for, but hoped wouldn't come too soon. Clarence House appeared before them, its familiar Georgian facade offering no clues about the drama unfolding within. The staff greeted them with their usual professionalism, but William noticed a certain tension in their manner, a careful formality that suggested they too were aware that something significant was happening. They were escorted directly to Charles's private study, a room filled with books, family photographs, and the comfortable clutter of a man who valued intellectual pursuits. Charles was standing by the window, looking out at the gardens. He turned as they entered, and William felt his heart skip a beat at his father's appearance. Charles looked older than William had ever seen him. Not just tired, but somehow diminished. His usually impeccable posture seemed slightly stooped, and there was a pallor to his complexion that makeup couldn't quite hide. Most disturbing were his eyes, which held a vulnerability and fear that William had never witnessed before. "Father," Catherine said softly, moving forward to embrace him. Charles held her tightly, perhaps a little longer than usual, and William noticed his father's hands trembling slightly. "Thank you for coming so quickly," Charles said, gesturing for them to sit in the comfortable chairs arranged around a small coffee table. "I apologize for the mysterious summons, but I felt this conversation needed to happen in person, privately." William and Catherine exchanged glances as they sat down. The formal setting, the careful words, the obvious emotional weight, all of it pointed to news of significant importance. Charles remained standing for a moment, seeming to gather his thoughts or perhaps his courage. Finally, he moved his own chair, sitting down carefully as if his body ached. "Yesterday afternoon, I received the results of some medical tests I've been undergoing," he began, his voice steady but quiet. "Tests that were prompted by some symptoms I've been experiencing for the past few months." The room fell completely silent except for the ticking of an antique clock on the mantel. William felt his mouth go dry, and he could sense Catherine tensing beside him. "I've been diagnosed with cancer," Charles continued, the words falling into the room like stones into still water. "Prostate cancer, specifically. It appears to be in the early stages, which is encouraging, but it will require immediate and aggressive treatment." The world seemed to stop for William. He heard the words, understood their meaning intellectually, but emotionally they felt impossible to process. His father, the king, the man who had always seemed invincible despite his advancing years, was seriously ill. Catherine's sharp intake of breath broke the silence. "Oh, Charles," she whispered, tears immediately springing to her eyes. "Ow, when did you first know something was wrong?" Charles managed a weak smile at her immediate concern for his well-being rather than the implications for the monarchy. "I've been experiencing some discomfort for a few months now. Fatigue, some pain. I initially attributed it to age and stress, but my doctors insisted on thorough testing after I mentioned the symptoms during a routine checkup." William finally found his voice, though it came out rougher than he intended. "What's the prognosis? What are we looking at in terms of treatment?" "The oncologist is optimistic," Charles replied, though his tone suggested he was trying to convince himself as much as them. "Caught early, prostate cancer has excellent survival rates. I'll be starting radiation therapy next week, followed by a course of hormone therapy. The entire treatment timeline is approximately 6 months." The practical implications began flooding William's mind. 6 months of treatment meant a significant reduction in Charles's public duties, possibly a complete withdrawal from royal engagements. The coronation had been less than a year ago, and the public was still adjusting to Charles as their monarch. Now, so soon after taking the throne, he would need to step back at least partially. What does this mean for your royal duties? William asked, voicing the question that was weighing on all their minds. Charles straightened slightly, and for a moment, the king overshadowed the worried father and patient. I'll continue with essential state business as much as possible, but public engagements will need to be drastically reduced. The doctors have been very clear about avoiding stress and maintaining my energy for fighting this disease. He paused, looking directly at William. This means, son, that you and Catherine will need to take on significantly more responsibilities. More than we had originally planned for at least another decade. The weight of those words settled over William like a heavy blanket. He had always known this day would come, had been preparing for it his entire life, but he had expected more time. Time to ease into the role, time for his children to grow older and more capable of handling the scrutiny that would come with their father's increased prominence. Catherine reached over and took William's hand, her touch grounding him in the moment. "We'll do whatever needs to be done," she said firmly, addressing Charles, but clearly speaking for both of them. "The question is, what do you need from us right now?" The simple, direct offer of support seemed to break something in Charles's careful composure. His eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, he wasn't the King of England. He was simply a man facing a frightening medical diagnosis, grateful for the love and support of his family. "I'm scared," he admitted quietly, the words barely audible. "I'm terrified of what this means for the monarchy, for the country I've barely begun to serve as king. But mostly I'm scared of leaving too much undone, of not having enough time to be the father and grandfather I want to be." The raw honesty of his admission broke down the last of William's emotional barriers. Tears began streaming down his face as he moved to kneel beside his father's chair, taking Charles's hands in his own. "You're going to beat this," William said fiercely, his voice thick with emotion. "And we're going to be right here with you every step of the way. The monarchy will survive, the country will understand, and you're already an excellent father and grandfather." Catherine joined them, wrapping her arms around both men in an embrace that spoke of family unity and unconditional love. The three of them stayed that way for several minutes, holding each other as the weight of the diagnosis and its implications settled around them. When they finally separated, Charles wiped his eyes and attempted to regain some of his usual composure. "There are practical matters we need to discuss," he said, though his voice still carried the tremor of emotion. "We'll need to inform the children, of course, though I'd prefer to wait until we have a clearer picture of the treatment schedule." William nodded, thinking of George, Charlotte, and Louis. How do you explain to children that their grandfather, who they see as larger than life, is seriously ill? How do you maintain their sense of security while preparing them for significant changes in their lives? "Camilla has been incredible through all of this," Charles continued. "She was with me when I received the diagnosis, and she's been my rock ever since. But this affects her too, and she'll need support as well." The mention of Camilla reminded them all that this crisis extended beyond just the immediate family. The queen consort would undoubtedly be struggling with her own fears and emotions while trying to support her husband through his treatment. "What about Harry?" William asked quietly, the question hanging heavy in the air. The complicated relationship between William and his brother had been a source of ongoing pain for Charles, and William knew that facing a serious illness would make the family estrangement even more difficult to bear. Charles's expression grew more troubled. "I haven't spoken to Harry yet. I wanted to tell you first, but I know I need to call him soon. Despite everything that's happened, he deserves to know. And perhaps," he trailed off, not finishing the thought, but William understood. "Perhaps this crisis might bring about some kind of reconciliation or at least a temporary ceasefire in the family conflict." The conversation continued for another hour, covering practical details and emotional processing in equal measure. They discussed which royal duties would need to be redistributed, how to handle media coverage of Charles's reduced schedule, and the delicate balance of maintaining public confidence while being honest about the king's health challenges. Catherine proved invaluable in these discussions. Her natural empathy and practical wisdom helping to navigate both the emotional and logistical complexities. She suggested ways to gradually prepare the public for increased appearances by her, and William, strategies for maintaining the children's normal routines despite the upheaval, and thoughtful approaches to supporting both Charles and Camilla through the treatment process. As they prepared to leave Clarence House, Charles pulled William aside for a private moment. "Son, I know this isn't how either of us envisioned your preparation for greater responsibility," he said quietly. "I had hoped to have many more years to guide you, to share the burden of kingship gradually. I'm sorry that circumstances are forcing this acceleration." William shook his head firmly. "Father, you have nothing to apologize for. You prepared me for this my entire life. And this isn't the end. This is just a challenge we'll face together. You're going to recover, and we'll all be stronger for having gone through this as a family." The drive back to Kensington Palace was quiet, both William and Catherine lost in their own thoughts as they processed the morning's revelations. The London streets looked the same, but everything felt different now. The weight of responsibility, of the monarchy's continuity, of their family's future, seemed to press down on them with new urgency. Back at home, they found their children returned from school, their young faces bright with the innocent joy of childhood. Louis ran to greet them, chattering excitedly about a story his teacher had read during morning circle time. Charlotte showed Catherine a drawing she had made during art class, while George described his upcoming science project with characteristic enthusiasm. Looking at their children, William felt the full impact of the morning's news settle over him. These three young people would soon see their lives change in ways they couldn't yet understand. Their grandfather's illness would mean more scrutiny, more responsibility, and less of the normal childhood experiences that he and Catherine had fought so hard to preserve for them. That evening, after the children were in bed, William and Catherine sat together in their private sitting room, finally able to process the day's events fully. Catherine had changed into comfortable clothes and curled up beside William on the sofa, her head resting against his shoulder. "How are you holding up?" she asked softly, her hand finding his and intertwining their fingers. William was quiet for a long moment, considering the question seriously. "I'm scared," he admitted finally. "Not just about Father's diagnosis, though that terrifies me, but I'm scared about what this means for us, for our children, for everything we've built here." Catherine lifted her head to look at him directly. "We'll figure it out," she said with quiet confidence. "We always do. And Charles is going to fight this with everything he has. The doctors said the prognosis is good." "I know," William replied, though his voice carried lingering doubt. "It's just we thought we had more time. The children are still so young, and we've worked so hard to give them as normal a childhood as possible. Now everything's going to change." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts about the challenges ahead. Outside their windows, London continued its nightly rhythm, unaware that the royal family's world had shifted dramatically in the space of a single morning conversation. The future, which had seemed so predictable just hours before, now stretched ahead full of uncertainty and challenge. But as they sat together, drawing strength from each other's presence, both William and Catherine felt a quiet determination settling over them. Whatever came next, they would face it together, as a family united by love and commitment to something larger than themselves. The following morning arrived with an unseasonable chill that seemed to mirror the heaviness in the air at Kensington Palace. William had barely slept, his mind racing through scenarios and implications of his father's diagnosis. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Charles's face from the previous morning. The vulnerability, the fear, the trembling hands that had betrayed the king's carefully maintained composure. Catherine was already awake when William stirred, sitting by the window with a cup of tea, watching the sunrise paint the palace gardens in soft shades of gold and pink. She had always been an early riser, but today her stillness suggested she too had spent the night wrestling with thoughts of the future. "Did you sleep at all?" William asked quietly, moving to sit beside her on the window seat. She shook her head slightly, offering him a sad smile. Every time I started to drift off, I kept thinking about how to tell the children. How do you explain something like this to Louis? He still thinks his grandfather is invincible. The breakfast routine that had seemed so normal just 24 hours earlier now felt surreal. George, Charlotte, and Louis chattered about their plans for the day, completely unaware that their world was about to shift dramatically. William found himself studying their faces, memorizing these last moments of their innocence before cancer became part of their vocabulary. The phone rang during breakfast, interrupting Louis's animated description of his planned Lego construction project. Catherine answered, recognizing Charles's private secretary's number immediately. "Good morning, Sir Clive," she said formally, though her voice carried warmth. After listening for a moment, her expression grew more serious. "Yes, of course. We'll be there within the hour." She hung up and looked at William meaningfully. "Your father would like to see us again this morning. Sir Clive mentioned that Camilla specifically requested we come as soon as possible." The mention of Camilla added another layer of complexity to an already overwhelming situation. William had grown to genuinely care for his stepmother over the years, appreciating how happy she made his father and how gracefully she had handled the enormous responsibility of becoming queen consort. Knowing that she was struggling too made the whole situation feel even more real and frightening. After arranging for the children's care with their nanny, William and Catherine made their second journey to Clarence House in as many days. The familiar route through London streets felt different now, charged with an urgency that hadn't existed before. Every red light, every moment of traffic seemed to delay them from reaching answers they desperately needed. This time, they were greeted not just by staff, but by Camilla herself, who was waiting in the entrance hall. The queen consort looked composed on the surface, but William could see the telltale signs of strain around her eyes and in the slight tension of her shoulders. When she embraced Catherine, he noticed her hands trembling slightly, much like Charles's had the day before. "Thank you for coming so quickly," Camilla said, her voice steady but softer than usual. "Charles had a difficult night, and I think having you both here will help him focus on what needs to be done rather than dwelling on his fears." They found Charles in his study again, but this time he was seated at his desk with papers spread before him, his reading glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed documents. The scene was almost aggressively normal, as if he was trying to convince himself that nothing fundamental had changed. "Good morning," he said, looking up as they entered. The formal greeting contrasted sharply with the emotional vulnerability he had shown the day before. Today, Charles seemed determined to approach his diagnosis as he would any other crisis requiring careful planning and decisive action. "I've been thinking overnight about how we need to handle this situation," he continued, gesturing for them to sit while Camilla settled into the chair beside his desk. "There are several immediate concerns that need addressing, and I believe it's important we tackle them systematically." William appreciated his father's attempt to regain control through organization, but he could see the effort it was costing Charles to maintain this businesslike demeanor. There was a slight tremor in his voice, and his usual commanding presence seemed diminished despite his best efforts. "First," Charles said, consulting his notes, "we need to establish a timeline for public disclosure. The Palace Communications team has prepared several options for announcing my diagnosis, ranging from immediate transparency to a more gradual revelation as treatment progresses." The idea of public announcement made the situation feel overwhelmingly real. Once the world knew about Charles's cancer, there would be no going back to privacy or normalcy. Every aspect of his treatment, every public appearance or absence, every change in his appearance would be scrutinized and analyzed by millions of people around the globe. Catherine leaned forward slightly. "What are you comfortable with, Charles? This is your health, your privacy. The timing should be whatever feels right to you and Camilla." Camilla reached over and squeezed Charles's hand. "We've discussed it extensively. Charles feels strongly that the people deserve honesty from their monarch, especially regarding something that will affect his ability to fulfill his duties. I've decided to make the announcement this Friday," Charles said decisively. "A written statement from the palace, followed by a brief video message. I want to be the one to tell the nation rather than having speculation and rumors spread. The weight of that decision settled over the room. William felt a mixture of pride and terror, pride in his father's courage and commitment to transparency, terror at what would come after the public learned of the king's illness. What about the children? William asked quietly. They need to hear this from us before the rest of the world knows. Charles's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly at the mention of his grandchildren. Yes, that's the second item we need to address. I'd like to tell them myself, if you're comfortable with that. Perhaps this evening, after they've finished their schoolwork and had dinner. The thought of George, Charlotte, and Louis learning about their grandfather's cancer made Catherine's eyes fill with tears. How do we make them understand without frightening them completely? She asked. Children are more resilient than we often give them credit for, Camilla offered gently. And they're going to take their cues from how we present this information. If we're honest but calm, if we focus on the treatment and the positive prognosis, they'll be better able to process it. William nodded, though his stomach churned at the thought of the conversation ahead. George is old enough to understand more of the implications. He'll probably have questions about what this means for our family's responsibilities. Which brings us to the third major issue, Charles continued, returning to his systematic approach. The redistribution of royal duties during my treatment period. William, you, and Catherine will need to take on the majority of my scheduled engagements for at least the next 6 months. The practical implications began flooding William's mind. State dinners, overseas visits, ceremonial duties, charity patronages. The list of additional responsibilities would be enormous. More than that, it would mean a dramatic increase in public exposure for his family, including the children. We're prepared to do whatever is necessary, William said firmly. But we'll need to discuss how this affects the children's schedules and privacy. They're already dealing with increased scrutiny as they get older. Catherine nodded in agreement. Perhaps we could maintain some of their normal routines by scheduling royal duties around school hours when possible. They need stability now more than ever. For the next 2 hours, they worked through the logistics of the transition. Charles had prepared detailed briefings on his most important patronages, upcoming state visits that would need to be reassigned or postponed, and ceremonial duties that couldn't be delayed. His thoroughness was both impressive and heartbreaking. Clearly, he had spent the sleepless night channeling his anxiety into productive planning. The conversation was interrupted by a soft knock on the door. Charles's private secretary entered with a look of apologetic urgency. Your Majesty, I apologize for the interruption, but the Prime Minister is requesting an urgent meeting this afternoon. He's indicated it's regarding your health situation. The reminder that Charles's illness would have political as well as personal ramifications added another layer of complexity to an already overwhelming situation. The government would need to be briefed, contingency plans would need to be activated, and the constitutional implications of the monarch's illness would require careful management. Schedule the meeting for 3 o'clock, Charles replied. I'll need William to attend as well, given the circumstances. After the secretary left, Charles turned back to his family with a weary expression. I had hoped we might have more time before involving the government formally, but I suppose it's inevitable. The afternoon meeting with the Prime Minister proved to be both reassuring and sobering. The government had well-established protocols for managing a monarch's illness, developed over decades of constitutional precedent. While William felt relieved to learn that systems were in place to maintain governmental stability, the formal nature of the discussions made his father's diagnosis feel even more serious and far-reaching. The Prime Minister, to his credit, struck exactly the right balance between official concern and personal sympathy. He assured Charles that the government would provide whatever support was needed while respecting the royal family's privacy as much as possible within the bounds of constitutional necessity. That evening, the conversation with the children proved to be one of the most difficult moments of William and Catherine's parenting experience. They had decided to tell them together in the comfortable setting of their family sitting room after dinner and homework were completed. George, at 11, grasped the seriousness immediately. His face grew pale as Charles explained the diagnosis in simple, age-appropriate terms, and William could see his eldest son's mind racing through the implications just as his own had done. "Will Grandpapa get better?" George asked quietly, his usual confidence replaced by uncertain worry. "The doctors are very optimistic," Charles replied gently, sitting forward to look directly at his grandson. "They caught the cancer early, and the treatment has a very high success rate. I'm going to fight this with everything I have." Charlotte, at 9, was more focused on the immediate practical questions. "Does this mean you can't come to my school play next month?" she asked, her disappointment evident despite her attempt to be brave. The innocent question hit everyone in the room hard. These were the moments that cancer would steal: school plays, birthday parties, casual family gatherings that formed the foundation of childhood memories. "I don't know yet, sweetheart," Charles admitted. "The treatment might make me very tired sometimes, but I'm going to try my best to be there for important things." Louis, at 7, was the most direct in his response. He simply climbed onto Charles's lap and hugged him tightly, as if his small arms could somehow provide protection against the illness. "I love you, Grandpapa," he whispered. The simple declaration broke down Charles's carefully maintained composure completely. Tears streamed down his face as he held his youngest grandson, and soon the entire family was crying together, not just for the fear and uncertainty ahead, but for the innocence that was being lost and the challenges they would face together. Later that evening, after the children had been tucked into bed with extra hugs and reassurances, William and Catherine sat with Charles and Camilla in the quiet of the family quarters. The formal discussions of the day had given way to honest, emotional processing. "I keep thinking about missed opportunities," Charles said quietly, staring into the fire. "All the years when I was so focused on my duties, on preparing to be king, that I missed precious time with my sons. And now, just when I finally have the chance to be a proper grandfather, to really enjoy that role." "You haven't missed your chance," William interrupted firmly. "You're going to beat this, and you're going to have many more years with the grandchildren. But even if the worst happened, which it won't, you've already been a wonderful grandfather to them. They adore you." Camilla nodded in agreement. "Charles, you've been present for them in ways that your own father never was for you. They know they're loved unconditionally." The comparison to his own father's distant parenting style seemed to offer Charles some comfort. He had made a conscious effort to be more emotionally available to his grandchildren than his upbringing had taught him to be, and the evidence of that success was clear in their easy affection and trust. "What about Harry?" Catherine asked gently, broaching the subject they had all been avoiding. "Have you decided when to call him?" Charles's expression grew more troubled. The estrangement from his younger son had been a source of constant pain, made worse by the very public nature of their family conflict. Facing a serious illness without the support of both his sons felt like a particularly cruel twist of fate. "I called him this morning," Charles admitted quietly. "It was difficult. He was shocked, of course, and I could hear in his voice that he wants to be supportive. But there's still so much anger, so much hurt between us." William felt a complex mix of emotions at this news. Part of him longed for his brother's presence during this crisis, remembering how they had supported each other through their mother's death. But another part of him was still wounded by Harry's very public criticisms of the family and his decision to step away from royal duties. "Did he say he would come back?" William asked, his voice carefully neutral. "He's thinking about it," Charles replied. "He said he needed to discuss it with Meghan and consider what's best for their children. I told him I understood, but I won't lie. I'm hoping he'll find a way to be here at least occasionally." The conversation continued late into the night, covering practical arrangements, emotional fears, and tentative hopes for the future. By the time they said their goodnights, all four of them were exhausted by the weight of processing so much life-changing information in such a short period. Driving home through the quiet London streets, William and Catherine held hands in the back of their car, both lost in thought about the challenges ahead. The announcement was just days away, and once it was made, their lives would change irrevocably. "Are you ready for this?" Catherine asked quietly as they neared Kensington Palace. William considered the question seriously. Was anyone ever really ready for their parents' serious illness? Was anyone prepared for the weight of increased royal responsibility during a family crisis? No, he said honestly, but I think that's probably normal. And we'll figure out as we go, just like we always have. As they pulled through the palace gates, William looked up at the windows of his children's bedrooms, where night lights cast gentle glows against the curtains. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and decisions, but tonight his family was safe and together under one roof. The future remained uncertain, but the foundation of love and commitment that bound them together felt stronger than ever. Whatever came next, they would face it together, drawing strength from each other and from the unshakable belief that love could overcome even the most daunting obstacles. Friday morning arrived with an intensity that seemed to charge the very air around Kensington Palace. Today was the day Charles would announce his cancer diagnosis to the world, transforming a private family crisis into a public matter of national concern. William had woken before dawn, his mind immediately focusing on the monumental day ahead and all its implications. Catherine was already in the kitchen when he came downstairs, having risen even earlier to prepare for what would undoubtedly be one of the most challenging days of their lives. She was making breakfast for the children with her usual efficiency, but William noticed the slight tremor in her hands as she buttered toast, and the way she kept glancing at the clock. The children seemed to sense the unusual tension in the house, though they couldn't quite understand its source. George was quieter than usual as he ate his cereal, occasionally glancing between his parents with the intuitive awareness that often surprised William in his eldest child. Charlotte tried to maintain her normal chatter about school activities, but her voice carried a forced brightness that suggested she, too, was feeling the weight of the morning's atmosphere. Louis, being the youngest, was the least affected by the emotional undercurrents, focusing primarily on building a tower with his breakfast cereal while humming contentedly. His innocent oblivion provided a strange comfort to William, a reminder that children possessed a natural resilience that allowed them to find joy even in the midst of family upheaval. The palace communications team had been working around the clock to prepare for the announcement. William had reviewed the proposed statement multiple times, each reading making the reality of his father's illness feel more concrete and frightening. The words were carefully crafted to strike the right balance between honesty and reassurance, acknowledging the seriousness of the diagnosis while emphasizing the positive prognosis and treatment plan. At precisely 9 o'clock, William's phone buzzed with a message from his father's private secretary confirming that Charles was ready to proceed with the announcement. The statement would be released to the media at noon, followed by a brief video message that Charles had recorded the evening before in his study at Clarence House. The hours leading up to the announcement felt interminable. William found himself unable to concentrate on his usual morning briefings, his attention constantly drifting to thoughts of how the public would react to the news. Charles had been king for less than a year, and the nation was still adjusting to his leadership style and vision for the monarchy. Now, they would have to grapple with the reality of their monarch's vulnerability and mortality. Catherine spent the morning on the phone with the children's schools, ensuring that teachers and administrators were prepared for the inevitable media attention that would follow the announcement. The 3 children had been fortunate to enjoy relatively normal school experiences, but William knew that would become much more difficult once their grandfather's illness became public knowledge. At 11:30, William and Catherine received a call from Camilla, who wanted to check in before the statement was released. Her voice carried a mixture of determination and apprehension that perfectly captured the family's collective emotional state. "Charles is holding up well," she reported, though William could hear the strain beneath her composed tone. "He's been reviewing his treatment schedule with the medical team this morning, and they continue to be optimistic about his response to therapy." The conversation was brief, but meaningful, a final moment of private family communication before their personal crisis became a matter of public concern and scrutiny. After hanging up, William and Catherine sat together in their sitting room, watching the clock approach noon with a sense of anticipation and dread. When the announcement was finally released, the reaction was immediate and overwhelming. William's phone began ringing constantly with calls from government officials, royal family members, and close friends expressing their shock and support. Social media erupted with messages of concern and well wishes from around the world, while news channels began wall-to-wall coverage of the story. The public response was largely positive and supportive, with people expressing genuine affection and concern for Charles personally rather than just formal respect for his position as monarch. William found himself surprisingly moved by the outpouring of love from ordinary citizens who shared their own stories of battling cancer or supporting family members through similar diagnoses. However, the announcement also triggered intense speculation about the future of the monarchy and William's readiness to take on increased responsibilities. Commentary ranged from thoughtful analysis of constitutional precedents to sensationalized predictions about potential abdication scenarios. William tried to ignore the most extreme coverage, but the constant buzz of media attention created an atmosphere of pressure that was difficult to escape. The most challenging aspect of the day proved to be managing the children's exposure to the news coverage. Despite their best efforts to shield George, Charlotte, and Louis from the media storm, it was impossible to completely insulate them from the reality that their grandfather's illness had become a global news story. George, in particular, struggled with seeing his grandfather's private health information discussed so publicly on television and in newspapers. "Why does everyone need to know about Grandpapa's illness?" he asked William that evening, his young face showing a mixture of confusion and protectiveness. William sat down beside his son, searching for words that would help an 11-year-old understand the unique position their family occupied. "Because Grandpapa isn't just our family member," he explained gently. "He's also the king, which means millions of people care about him and want to know that he's okay. Sometimes when you're in our position, private things have to become public, because people who care about you deserve to know the truth." The explanation seemed to satisfy George intellectually, but William could see his son was still troubled by the invasion of their family's privacy. It was a harsh lesson in the reality of royal life, one that William had hoped to delay for a few more years. That weekend brought an unexpected phone call that would add another layer of complexity to an already emotional situation. Harry called William directly, something that hadn't happened in over a year due to their strained relationship. When William saw his brother's name on his phone, his heart began racing with a mixture of hope and apprehension. "Hello, Harry," William said, accepting the call while stepping into his private study for privacy. "William," Harry's voice came through, and immediately William could hear the emotion his brother was carrying. "I've been thinking nonstop since Father told me about his diagnosis. I know things between us have been difficult, but this is bigger than our disagreements." The simple acknowledgement that family came before their personal conflicts brought tears to William's eyes. Despite all the hurt and anger of recent years, Harry was still his brother, still the person who had stood beside him at their mother's funeral and understood the unique pressures of their shared upbringing. "I'm glad you called," William replied honestly. "This whole situation has made me realize how much I've missed having you as a brother, not just during good times, but especially during crises like this." They talked for over an hour, sharing their fears about their father's diagnosis and memories of his strength throughout their childhood. Harry expressed regret about not being physically closer during this difficult time, while William assured him that their father understood the complicated logistics of Harry's situation in California. "I want to come for a visit," Harry said finally. "Not permanently, and I can't make any promises about public appearances or royal duties. But Father shouldn't have to go through cancer treatment without both his sons nearby, at least occasionally." The offer brought both relief and concern to William. Having Harry's support during this crisis would mean everything to Charles, but it would also inevitably create media speculation about potential reconciliation and return to royal duties. The family would need to navigate carefully to ensure that Harry's visit provided comfort, without creating additional pressure or unrealistic expectations. "We would all love to have you here," William said carefully, "but only if you're sure it's what you want and what's best for your family. The media attention will be intense, especially given the timing." Harry's laugh carried both humor and resignation. "When isn't the media attention intense around our family? I've made peace with the fact that every decision I make will be analyzed and criticized. What matters now is being there for Father." The conversation ended with tentative plans for Harry to visit within the next few weeks, timing coordinated around Charles's treatment schedule and the family's existing commitments. William felt a cautious optimism about the possibility of healing some of the wounds between them, even if it was prompted by such difficult circumstances. Meanwhile, Charles began his treatment regimen with characteristic determination and grace. The radiation therapy sessions were scheduled for early mornings to minimize disruption to his essential royal duties, though he had reluctantly agreed to cancel or postpone most public engagements for the next several months. William and Catherine found themselves thrust into a level of responsibility they had never experienced before. State dinners, charity galas, overseas visits, and ceremonial duties filled their calendar with unprecedented intensity. While they had always known this day would come eventually, the sudden acceleration of their preparation was both exciting and terrifying. The children adapted to their parents' increased responsibilities with remarkable resilience, though William noticed subtle changes in their behavior. George became more serious and responsible, often helping his younger siblings with homework or bedtime routines without being asked. Charlotte threw herself into her school activities with increased focus, as if staying busy could help her avoid thinking about her grandfather's illness. Louis remained largely unchanged, his natural cheerfulness providing a bright spot in the family's more subdued atmosphere. Catherine proved to be invaluable during this transition period, her natural empathy and communication skills helping to smooth diplomatic relationships and maintain the high standards expected of royal engagements. William watched with admiration and gratitude as she navigated complex social situations and represented the monarchy with grace and intelligence. The most moving moment of those difficult weeks came during Charles's third week of treatment. Despite feeling tired and somewhat weak from the radiation therapy, he insisted on keeping a long-standing commitment to visit a children's cancer ward at a London hospital. William and Catherine accompanied him, wanting to provide support while also learning from his approach to such emotionally challenging royal duties. Watching his father interact with young cancer patients and their families was both heartbreaking and inspiring for William. Charles spoke to each child individually, sharing his own experience with treatment in age-appropriate ways that helped normalize their experiences while maintaining appropriate boundaries about his royal position. One 8-year-old girl, completely bald from chemotherapy but wearing a bright pink tutu over her hospital gown, asked Charles if he was scared about his treatment. The directness of the question caught everyone off guard, but Charles answered with complete honesty. "Sometimes I am scared," he admitted, kneeling down to her eye level. "But I've learned that being brave doesn't mean you're never afraid. It means you keep going even when you are afraid, and you let the people who love you help you through the difficult parts." The simple wisdom of his response resonated throughout the room, affecting not just the young patients, but their parents and the medical staff as well. William realized in that moment that his father's illness, while devastating personally, might also provide him with a unique opportunity to connect with people facing similar challenges in ways that his position had never previously allowed. The visit reinforced William's growing appreciation for the deeper responsibilities of royal service. It wasn't just about ceremony and tradition, but about using their platform and visibility to provide comfort, support, and hope to people facing their own struggles. His father's example during this visit became a template for how William wanted to approach his own increased duties. That evening, as they drove home together, Charles seemed more energized than he had since beginning treatment. "Today reminded me why this job matters," he said quietly. looking out of the London streets passing by their window. Yes, we cut ribbons and attend dinners, but occasionally we get to make a real difference in someone's life. That little girl in the pink tutu gave me more strength today than I've felt in weeks. The observation struck William deeply, highlighting how service to others could become a source of healing and purpose even during personal crisis. It was a lesson he would carry with him as he prepared for his own expanded role and the challenges that lay ahead. As they approached the end of Charles's first month of treatment, the family had settled into new routines and responsibilities. The initial shock and fear had given way to determined optimism and practical adaptation. While the future remained uncertain, they had proven to themselves and each other that they could handle whatever challenges arose, drawing strength from their unity and shared commitment to service. The announcement of Harry's upcoming visit had been carefully managed to minimize speculation while acknowledging the family's desire to be together during this difficult time. William felt a mixture of anticipation and nervousness about seeing his brother again, hoping that their recent phone conversations could translate into genuine healing when they were face to face. Most importantly, Charles's medical team continued to report positive responses to treatment, with early indicators suggesting that the cancer was responding well to the radiation therapy. While they remained cautious about long-term prognosis, the initial results provided reasons for genuine hope and optimism about Charles's recovery prospects. 3 months into Charles's treatment, the royal family had established a new normal that balanced hope with caution, duty with family needs, and public service with private healing. The initial shock and fear had evolved into a steady determination to face each day with courage and grace, drawing strength from the overwhelming public support and the positive medical reports that arrived with increasing regularity. William stood at his office window in Kensington Palace on a crisp autumn morning, watching the changing leaves in the gardens while reflecting on how dramatically their lives had transformed since that first devastating phone call. The increased responsibilities had pushed him to grow in ways he hadn't expected, developing new confidence in his ability to represent the monarchy while maintaining the authentic connection to people that had always been his strength. Catherine had proven to be not just a supportive partner, but a true equal in their shared duties. Her natural warmth and genuine interest in people's lives had made her incredibly effective at the human side of royal work, while her intelligence and careful preparation ensured she could handle the more formal diplomatic requirements with aplomb. William often marveled at how seamlessly she had adapted to the increased scrutiny and responsibility. The children had shown remarkable resilience throughout the ordeal, adapting to their grandfather's illness and their parents' busier schedules with a maturity that both impressed and concerned William. George had become something of a protective older brother, not just to his siblings, but to the entire family, often checking on everyone's well-being with touching earnestness. Charlotte had channeled her energy into her studies and activities with laser focus, earning praise from teachers for her dedication and leadership. Louis remained largely unaffected, his natural joy and curiosity providing bright spots in even the most challenging days. The most significant development had been Harry's gradual reintegration into the family circle. His first visit back to London had been tentative and carefully orchestrated, but the genuine emotion of seeing their father battling cancer had broken down many of the barriers that had seemed insurmountable just months before. While he hadn't resumed any official royal duties, Harry had become a regular presence during Charles's treatment, providing emotional support and helping to maintain family morale. The reconciliation between the brothers had been slow and sometimes awkward, but it was undeniably real. They were learning to navigate their different life choices while rebuilding the foundation of love and shared history that had sustained them through their mother's death and their father's early struggles with public opinion. The process wasn't always smooth, but both men seemed committed to healing their relationship for the sake of their father and their own emotional well-being. On this particular morning, William was preparing for what had become one of his most meaningful regular commitments, accompanying Charles to his treatment appointments. The king had initially resisted having family members present during his medical care, preferring to maintain privacy and independence. However, as the treatment progressed, and he occasionally felt weak or disoriented, he had reluctantly accepted that having support made the process easier for everyone involved. The drive to the private medical facility had become an opportunity for father and son to have uninterrupted conversations about everything from royal duties to personal reflections on life and legacy. These weekly journeys had brought them closer together than they had ever been, breaking down the formal barriers that had sometimes characterized their relationship in the past. "How are you feeling about today?" William asked as they settled into the back of the car for the familiar route across London. Charles smiled, though William could see the fatigue that had become a constant companion since beginning treatment. "Optimistic." Dr. Richardson mentioned yesterday that the latest scan results were very encouraging. "The radiation appears to be doing exactly what we hoped it would do." The positive medical news had been a source of tremendous relief for the entire family. While they remained cautious about declaring victory too early, the consistent improvement in Charles's condition had allowed them to begin thinking about the future with genuine hope rather than just determined courage. "Camilla mentioned you've been thinking about resuming some public engagements," William said carefully. They had all been protective of Charles's energy and health, sometimes to the point of being overprotective, and William wanted to support his father's desire to return to normal activities while ensuring he didn't push too hard too soon. "I miss it," Charles admitted. "The treatment has been necessary, and I'm grateful for the time it's given me to focus on my health. But I became king to serve, not to hide away in private medical facilities. I want to get back to the work that gives my life meaning." William understood the sentiment completely. He had watched his father struggle with being sidelined just as he was beginning to establish his reign and implement his vision for the monarchy. The forced inactivity had been almost as challenging as the physical effects of treatment. At the medical facility, they were greeted by Dr. Richardson, the oncologist who had become not just Charles's primary physician, but a trusted advisor to the entire family. Her combination of medical expertise and emotional intelligence had been invaluable during the most frightening phases of treatment. "Good morning, Your Majesty," she said with a warm professionalism that had made Charles comfortable from their first meeting. "I have some very good news to share with you today." William felt his heart rate increase as they settled into the consultation room. Good news was always welcome, but he had learned not to assume anything when it came to cancer treatment. Hope was precious, but it needed to be balanced with realistic expectations. The latest imaging shows continued significant reduction in the tumor's size, Dr. Richardson continued, pulling up the scan results on her computer screen. "More importantly, all the surrounding tissue appears completely healthy, with no signs of spread or recurrence. Your response to treatment has been textbook perfect." The relief that flooded through William was so intense, it was almost overwhelming. For months, he had carried a constant low-level anxiety about his father's prognosis, even as the reports remained positive. To hear such definitively good news felt like being released from a weight he hadn't fully realized he was carrying. Charles was quiet for a moment, absorbing the information with the careful consideration he brought to all important matters. "What does this mean for the remainder of my treatment schedule?" he asked finally. "We'll complete the full course of radiation as planned, but I'm comfortable saying that your prognosis is excellent. Once treatment is finished, we'll move to monitoring and maintenance, which should allow you to resume normal activities with just regular checkups." The conversation continued for another 30 minutes, covering practical details about the transition back to full royal duties and long-term health management. By the time they left the medical facility, both Charles and William were struggling to contain their joy and relief. "I need to call Camilla immediately," Charles said as soon as they were in the car. "She's been trying to stay positive, but I know she's been terrified about the possibility of bad news." The phone call was brief, but emotional, with Camilla's tears of relief clearly audible even from William's position across the car. The 3 months of treatment had taken a toll on her as well, and knowing that her husband would likely make a full recovery lifted a burden she had been carrying with remarkable grace and strength. Their next call was to Catherine, who was at a school event with Charlotte. William could hear the transformation in his wife's voice as he shared the good news. The tight control she had been maintaining finally, relaxing as she allowed herself to truly believe that Charles would be okay. The decision about when and how to share the positive news with the public required careful consideration. The Palace Communications team had been preparing for various scenarios, and Charles was eager to reassure the nation that had shown such overwhelming support during his illness. However, they wanted to be certain about the medical facts before making any announcements that might raise unrealistic expectations. After consulting with Dr. Richardson and the Palace medical team, they decided to wait until Charles completed his treatment course before making a formal announcement. This would allow them to speak with confidence about his full recovery while maintaining appropriate medical caution about long-term prognosis. That evening, the extended family gathered at Clarence House for what had become their traditional post-treatment dinner. These weekly meals had evolved into precious family time, allowing everyone to check in with Charles's progress while maintaining normal family relationships that had nothing to do with cancer or royal duties. Harry had flown in from California the day before for what would be his longest visit since beginning his regular trips home. The improvement in his relationship with William had been gradual but consistent, built on shared concern for their father and mutual recognition that family bonds were more important than their previous disagreements. The children were particularly excited to see their Uncle Harry again, and their enthusiasm provided a joyful energy that filled the dining room with laughter and chatter. George peppered Harry with questions about life in California, while Charlotte showed off her latest art projects with pride. Louis simply enjoyed having another adult who was willing to engage with his endless imaginative games and stories. "Uncle Harry, will you come to my school sports day next month?" George asked during dessert, his question carrying the weight of hoping his family would remain intact and present for important moments. Harry glanced at William before answering, the brief exchange showing how much their communication had improved. "I'll do my best to be there, George. My schedule is a bit complicated, but family events are my priority when I'm in London." The promise clearly meant a lot to George, who beamed with satisfaction. William felt grateful that his brother was making an effort to be present for the children, knowing how much their uncle's attention and approval meant to them. Later that evening, after the children had been tucked into bed with the usual round of goodnight hugs and stories, the adults gathered in Charles's study for a more serious conversation about the future. The positive medical news had created an opportunity to begin planning for the gradual resumption of Charles's full royal duties, but it also raised questions about maintaining the changes that had brought the family closer together. "I don't want to lose what we've gained during these months," Charles said thoughtfully, holding Camilla's hand while looking around the room at his family. "Yes, the cancer has been terrifying, but it's also given us something precious. We're closer now than we've been in years, maybe ever." William nodded in agreement. The crisis had stripped away many of the formal barriers that had sometimes made family relationships feel constrained by protocol and duty. They had learned to support each other as people first, royal family members second. "I'd like to propose that we maintain some of the traditions we've developed," Charles continued. "These weekly dinners, the more regular communication, the collaborative approach to royal duties that you and Catherine have pioneered so brilliantly." Catherine smiled at the compliment, but William could see she was thinking about the practical implications. "We've all grown during this experience," she said. "The question is how to preserve that growth while returning to normal responsibilities and routines." Harry spoke up from his position near the fireplace. "From an outside perspective, watching how you've all handled this crisis has been remarkable. The strength, the unity, the grace under pressure. It's made me proud to be part of this family in ways I haven't felt in years." His admission brought tears to Charles's eyes. The reconciliation with Harry had been one of the few positive outcomes of his diagnosis, and knowing that his illness had helped heal the family rift made his own struggles feel worthwhile. "What about you, Harry? William asked quietly. Now that father is going to be okay, what are your plans for the future? It was the question they had all been avoiding, not wanting to pressure Harry about his long-term intentions while their father was still undergoing treatment. But with recovery now seeming certain, practical questions about family relationships and responsibilities needed to be addressed. Harry was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing his words carefully. I've been thinking about that a lot during these visits. My life in California is good, and I have responsibilities there that I can't just abandon. But I've also been reminded of what I lose by being so far away from family. He paused, looking around the room at each of them. I can't promise a return to royal duties or move back to London, but I can commit to being more present, more available when family needs require it. Maybe that means more regular visits, or finding ways to support the monarchy from a distance. The conversation continued late into the night, covering everything from practical logistics to emotional hopes for the future. By the time they said their goodnights, all of them felt optimistic, not just about Charles's health recovery, but about the family's emotional healing as well. 6 weeks later, Charles completed his final radiation treatment with a small celebration attended by his medical team, family, and closest staff members. The moment felt simultaneously momentous and anticlimactic. Months of anxiety and hope condensed into a simple completion of a medical protocol that had likely saved his life. Dr. Richardson's final assessment was unequivocally positive. The cancer had responded completely to treatment, with no remaining evidence of disease and an excellent prognosis for long-term health. Charles would need regular monitoring for the next several years, but his life expectancy and quality of life were expected to be completely normal. The public announcement of Charles's successful treatment completion was met with celebration across the Commonwealth and around the world. Messages of congratulations poured in from world leaders, ordinary citizens, and fellow cancer survivors who have been inspired by his openness about his diagnosis and treatment. More importantly for the family, Charles was able to gradually resume his full range of royal duties with renewed energy and purpose. His experience as a patient had given him new insights into healthcare challenges and a deeper empathy for people facing serious illness. These perspectives enriched his approach to royal engagements and charitable work in ways that would benefit his reign for years to come. William and Catherine continued their expanded roles with growing confidence and effectiveness, having proven to themselves and others that they were ready for increased responsibility whenever it might be required. Their partnership had been strengthened by the crisis, and their children had learned valuable lessons about family loyalty, resilience, and service to others. Looking back on the experience months later, William realized that his father's cancer diagnosis, while terrifying, had ultimately made their family stronger and more united than ever before. They had faced the possibility of loss and emerged with a deeper appreciation for the time they had together and the work they were privileged to do on behalf of others. The king's tears had been replaced by renewed purpose. The family's fears transformed into unshakable bonds of love and support that would sustain them through whatever challenges the future might bring.